Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Sony panics, loses millions, cancels Spider-Man villain universe. Well, you can't blame them for canceling the universe if they're losing millions of dollars over it. How do you have the rights to the Spider-Man franchise? It's actually pretty big. I mean, Spider-Man is actually bigger than Deadpool and Wolverine. He really is. So how could you lose millions of dollars and have to cancel your plans to do more spin-off movies? It may be because they didn't really think this one through. They didn't have Spider-Man featured in the Spider-Man villain universe. Okay, I understand that's a complicated issue. There are good reasons why they can't just have Spider-Man running around in Kraven the Hunter. I understand that. He can't be in the Venom movie. I understand that. You can't have Spider-Man mixing it up with Madam Web, but you can use like similar logos to the Spider-Man iconic spider on his chest. Okay, it's closer, but did they think this thing through? Did they say to themselves, we understand what a Spider-Man fan wants. We understand how to create an aesthetic that makes a spin-off really look and feel like a Spider-Man movie in any way whatsoever. No, they didn't do that, but they did have Venom, which is, a lot of people know who Venom is. Unlike Madam Web and unlike Kraven the Hunter and unlike Morbius. Plus, Venom has the advantage of looking a lot like Spider-Man, like a badass version of Spider-Man, because that's what Todd McFarlane and editor of the Spider-Man comics group, Jim Salicrup, and writer of Spider-Man at the time, David Michelinie, turned Venom into. So, okay, if you've got the Spider-Man villain, Venom, and Venom is a hit back then, Venom is a hit right now, how could you not make Venom the center of a Spider-Man villain universe? You could have done that, right? I mean, maybe there's some contract limitation that I'm not aware of, but that ought to have been the center of the Spider-Man villain universe. Venom. Tom Hardy was good in the Spider-Man Venom movies, but you don't need Tom Hardy. You have Venom, but they didn't really think this through. They really thought that just because Venom was known and successful, and that actually worked really well as a movie. They did $856 million worldwide on Venom. The sequels each did so far around $500 million. That's also pretty good. It's always better when the sequels do as well or better than the original movie, but that isn't something that's going to happen every time. But that was never going to happen for Madam Web. It wasn't going to happen for Kraven the Hunter. So what was the plan? There really was no plan. The one thing I can say is, at least when people blow their comic book universes, it's not like people don't also blow their movie universes. It just goes to show you have to think about what the customer wants and make sure you're giving the customer what they want, but that there's also some coherent narrative attached to the branding, just for the purposes of knowing that what you're doing is actually about something. From Mirror Station, Sony is officially killing off its Spider-Man villain universe after Kraven the Hunter. While Venom was relatively successful for Sony Pictures, Venom 1 especially was very successful for Sony. Movies like Morbius and Madam Web have caused the company to kill off its plans for the universe. What were they going to do? A Madam Web 2? Did they think about the storylines for these things like whatsoever? No, they did not. Coming from The Wrap, as Kraven hunts for audience, Sony's Marvel Universe takes final bow for now. And from Forbes, Kraven the Hunter killed Sony's chaotic Spider-Man universe. Kraven the Hunter is the final film of Sony's Spider-Man universe, which never saw Spider-Man appear, but did lead to the success of Venom and inspired many Madam Web memes. Yeah, Madam Web was funny for a while, but that wasn't the goal of Sony. You know, they're supposed to be putting out good entertainment, maintaining their franchises, expanding their franchises, and not losing hundreds of millions of dollars. That's like the whole goal of doing these movie things. Coming from The Wrap, as Kraven hunts for audience, Sony's Marvel Universe takes final bow for now. Quote, it's really about the next Spider-Man film, according to a top talent agent who told us to The Wrap. The lights were on, but nobody came. At Brazil's prestigious Comic-Con experience on Sunday, Sony Pictures' surprise panel for Kraven the Hunter, the studio's latest non-Spider-Man Marvel movie, played to rows of empty seats, according to an individual in attendance. There were no stars, and not that many fans. Just silence where superhero hype should have been. That gives you an idea that maybe people even in the comics community weren't excited about this movie. Of course, it was the success of Venom that got these guys off in a crazy direction, just randomly picking out popular villains from Marvel Comics' Spider-Man series. They actually do have the rights to a large number of Marvel characters. But this ain't Joker. This ain't Venom. You can't just throw Kraven out there and say, hey, is everyone excited about Kraven? Like, no, not really. People aren't. You could have introduced Kraven, or you could have introduced Madam Web, or whoever else you wanted to do a spin-out movie on the Venom franchise. Like, wouldn't that, if you had owned the rights to Venom and Marvel had limited control over what you could do with Venom, would you not do more Venom? And would you not do like a spin out from Venom if you wanted to do a villain series? Doesn't that seem like the right thing to do? The number one priority would have been protect Venom, because that's your vehicle of, okay, this kind of looks like Spider-Man. We could do kind of whatever we want with it. We don't have the restrictions we have when it comes to Spider-Man. And even if they had a lot of freedom with Spider-Man, they don't want to ruin Spider-Man, but they have Venom. He looks villainous. He's the villainous Spider-Man. So why don't you just spin other characters out of that? You could have featured, instead of 18 villains in the latest Spider-Man movie, put like 3 or 2 in a Venom movie with the idea of testing out audience reaction. But you still have to plan out the stories. Do you know they don't reach out to old Spider-Man comics editors and comics editors-in-chief who really understood the characters? I'm not talking about Joe Quesada. He's fine and all that. I'm talking about Jim Salicrup, Jim Shooter. They really don't go out of their ways to reach out to those guys and figure out, like, when these iconic characters were being created. And Kraven's Last Hunt was iconic. It was a big part of what Spider-Man's identity ultimately wound up being. A lot of people who know comics know Kraven's Last Hunt. They know Kraven the Hunter. Okay, fine. Why don't you talk to Jim Salicrup? Ask him what he thinks of what you should do with a Kraven the Hunter character, or how you might introduce it if it were in comics, for example. Because there are similar story structures from comics to movies. There are similar story structures from comics to TV. You could actually talk to the people who did it successfully with an existing audience that you're ultimately trying to reach as a base audience and then expand beyond to the larger world. But these are little strange idiosyncratic characters that don't have a lot of customer awareness. So how are you going to do that without talking to the people who already did it successfully? They would do it out of love, but they would also do it for a fee. Pay those guys. And when you do movies and TV shows based on comics, do a good job. If you want people to do a good job on things for you, go to the people who've already proven they can do things. It's not just about comics. It's about anything. People who have done something successfully already can repeat that success. At least they're the closest to being able to repeat that success. I would have never developed any kind of plan to introduce any kind of character without going first to the people who actually introduced that character if they happen to be available within the larger Spider-Man world in the comic books. Why would you not do that? I don't get it. The half-empty panel presentation of a $110 million budgeted anti-hero movie at one of the world's largest pop culture events reflected the Sony Marvel franchise's diminishing profile outside the mainline Spider-Man movies starring Tom Holland. While Venom: The Last Dance launched on more than 4,000 movie screens in October, Kraven the Hunter will debut this Friday, which it already debuted, in just 3,000 movie theaters. A stark 25% reduction that signals waning confidence in Sony's failed Marvel experiment. This latest setback follows a string of disappointments for Sony as it has sought to exploit its rights hold on most of the characters in Marvel's Spider-Man comics, from the historic second-week collapse of Morbius in 2022 to the disastrous $52 million worldwide opening of Madam Web earlier this year. The studio's desire to capitalize on the superhero boom led to a series of tonal mismatches that left audiences confused rather than intrigued. Venom succeeded largely on Tom Hardy's chaotic charm, but attempts to replicate that formula with Morbius and Madam Web resulted in films that seemed uncertain whether they were horror, action, or comedy. Also, just Straight visually, Venom does look like Spider-Man, and that is kinda compelling. The identity crisis extended beyond individual films to a universe as a whole, which never established a consistent style or vision in the way Marvel Studios had with the MCU. Not that it would have been so easy, it would have been really difficult. But they didn't even try to do it. Quote, anytime you try to spin off a character, you're hoping to grab some of that magic created by the halo effect that the branding of Spider-Man can bring to the table. But it's not always a slam dunk. According to a senior media analyst, it's easier said than done. Although he noted that Kraven could find a place in the December marketplace as an R-rated counter-programming to family-friendly fare. I don't think so. The apparent end of Sony's Marvel spin-off franchise represents one of Hollywood's most ambitious and costly attempts to build a shared cinematic universe without its central character. While Spider-Man himself swings successfully through Disney's Marvel Cinematic Universe thanks to a landmark shared deal struck in 2015 with Marvel Studios, Sony's solo efforts to mine Spidey's rogues gallery have proved to be a costly catastrophe. The studio has burned through more than $465 million in production costs, while audience interest plummeted with each release. Quote, the biggest issue with Sony's Spider-Man spin-off seems to be the lack of quality control. The movies just aren't good, according to a Sony insider who told us to The Wrap. Quote, sometimes that lack of quality meets a movie no one asked for, which was the case with Madam Web, and that's a no-win scenario. It may be time for Sony to start cultivating different IP to launch new franchises. The financial trajectory of Sony's Marvel Universe tells its own stark story. While 2018's Venom grossed $856 million worldwide and its sequel managed to cross $500 million despite pandemic constraints, each subsequent release showed diminishing returns. Morbius limped to $167 million globally, with a historic 74% second weekend box office drop that became a social media punchline. While Venom: The Last Dance, the third and likely final film in the Venom franchise, demonstrated the enduring appeal of Hardy's portrayal with a $472 million worldwide gross as of the past Monday, the Dakota Johnson-led Madam Web marked a new low for the franchise with its $52 million worldwide opening earlier this year, representing one of the weakest debuts for a major superhero film in recent memory, compounded by memes poking fun at the female-centric film's quality. The steady erosion of box office returns from nearly $900 million to less than $500 million for the flagship Venom series alone painted a clear picture for Sony executives. Audiences are simply not having it. The irony of Sony's current predicament lies in its previous mastery of the superhero genre. Before the arrival of the cinematic universe in 2007, Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man trilogy with Tobey Maguire helped establish the modern superhero blockbuster. 2004's Spider-Man 2 is still considered among the genre's finest achievements. Even Andrew Garfield's shortened Amazing Spider-Man tenure demonstrated the studio's ability to reimagine the character for new audiences. This track record makes the current string of critically panned spin-offs all the more striking. It's a cautionary tale about mistaking audience love for a character as guaranteed interest in their wider world. The seeds of Sony's ill-fated spin-off universe were planted in the aftermath of 2014's The Amazing Spider-Man 2. When that film's underperformance derailed plans for a Sinister Six movie and other Spider-Man-centric spin-offs, Sony struck a deal with Disney to integrate Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, while Marvel Studios took creative lead on the main Spider-Man movies, which Sony would continue to produce and distribute. The result is a beloved Spider-Man in Holland and a trilogy of films that grossed nearly $4 billion. Yet, rather than focusing solely on that partnership in a baffling move, Sony remained determined to also exploit their Marvel character rights independently. The surprise success of 2018's Venom, which grossed $856 million worldwide despite poor reviews, proved intoxicating to studio executives, convincing them they could build a parallel universe of Spider-Man villains without Spider-Man himself. One of the key architects of Sony's Marvel spin-off strategy, Sony PANICS, publicly defended the projects multiple times. But the one-off Venom success story proved a template for disaster, as Sony rushed to greenlight additional spin-offs without the coherent creative vision that made their earlier Spider-Man films, even Venom, connect with audiences. For Sony, the future appears to lie in projects more directly connected to Spider-Man himself. Quote, they've developed what they want to develop for now, a top talent agent told The Wrap. It's really about the next Spider-Man film. According to a second Sony insider, the studio is now focusing its efforts on Holland's highly anticipated fourth Spider-Man film, the next installment in the acclaimed Spider-Verse animated film series with Beyond the Spider-Verse, and a Spider-Noir television series featuring Nicolas Cage, projects that lean into rather than away from the web-slinger's central appeal. And the issue of focus is a really good point, because they can't actually do everything. No one can actually do everything. It's not even a matter of just money and time and development. You can't always just hire more people to do a good job. They have to pick their shots. And focusing on the Spider-Man character, a proven thing, makes the most sense. If they had someone who was great, but maybe not ready to take on Spider-Man, you could have put him in charge of a Venom villain universe. Everything's centered around Venom. They didn't do that. They just took random shots and got distracted. While industry conversations about superhero fatigue have intensified in recent years, much of that discourse has centered specifically on Sony's Marvel offerings. The critical and commercial failures of Morbius and Madame Web seemed less indicative of audience exhaustion with the genre itself than an outright rejection of Sony's poorly executed superhero movies, which is not something you usually see in Hollywood media. Usually they do blame toxic fans. They blame superhero fatigue. They don't blame that, the movies weren't any good. As successful releases from other studios like The Batman and Deadpool and Wolverine demonstrated, audiences remain willing to turn out for a well-crafted superhero film. They simply have become more discriminating about quality. The fundamental flaw in Sony's approach lay in its attempt to build a universe around Spider-Man's rogues gallery while dancing around the web-slinger himself. The studio found itself in the peculiar position of owning rights to hundreds of characters whose stories traditionally revolve around their relationships with a hero who remain conspicuously absent from their narratives. And you know who could have solved that problem? An editor who dealt with an issue like that while he did it on the Marvel Comics. And if the sales were good back then, if the audience understood and responded to the established stories, you could have used that. But they did not. That creative constraint forced writers into increasingly awkward narrative situations, perhaps most evident in the much-derided post-credit scenes in Morbius that tried to tie the movie into Michael Keaton's villainous Vulture character from Spider-Man Homecoming, and it never paid off. Not that Sony didn't try to bring that Spider-Man shine to its films. In 2019, after the success of the second Holland Spider-Man film Far From Home, talks between Sony and Marvel Studios to continue the partnership fell apart. Sony announced it would instead make Spider-Man 3 on its own without Marvel or Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige's involvement. The outcry was so intense, and the notion of a Marvel Studios-less Spider-Man movie so distasteful, that Holland himself got involved. He called Disney CEO Bob Iger personally to bring both sides back together. It worked, and Spider-Man No Way Home grossed nearly $2 billion. Sony's biggest asset with this is that they own the Spider-Man rights. They should leverage owning the Spider-Man rights, and if they don't have the skill set to reach out creatively to people who understand the characters, the hundreds of characters that they own the rights to tied to Spider-Man, then of course they shouldn't do anything else with those characters. Just focus on Spider-Man. It's a moneymaker. Why not do that? Why delay one potential animated Spider-Man project because you're too focused on doing other things if you could just do things that do actually make money that it seems fans are responding positively to? They'll stick with that from now on. They know what they're doing now, which is don't really do anything special. Just stick with Spider-Man. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.